The letter felt like a brick in my hands. Heavy, deliberate, impossible to ignore. 15 bullet points, typed with surgical precision, outlining why a decade of marriage should end. 15 reasons why I was no longer worth the effort. I stumbled upon it while digging through her desk for tax paperwork. It wasn't even hidden well, almost like she wanted it found. The first hit was visceral, a gut punch of betrayal. But within moments, something colder took its place. A chilling, focused calm I hadn't felt in years. I read it again, slower this time. Emotionally distant. Stuck financially. No drive. Each accusation stung. But what struck me more was the mirror she refused to hold up. These flaws weren't just mine. And yet, she'd written them like a closing argument in a trial I didn't know was happening. I slid the letter back, aligning it perfectly where it had been. No confrontation. Not yet. This wasn't a moment for fireworks or begging. This called for something sharper, strategy. If she'd taken the time to draft a list, she'd been planning this for a while. And I'd been too focused on building our future to notice the foundation was already eroding. That week, I started watching her closer. The way she smiled at her phone. The care in her outfits for errands. The flutter of nerves when certain friends called. She wasn't just imagining freedom, she was rehearsing it. Testing escape routes while keeping me as her fallback. Friday night over dinner, she mentioned her friend's recent divorce. She seems so free now, she mused, watching me over the rim of her wine glass. Sometimes I wonder what that feels like. I nodded, poured her more wine. Her eyes flickered with confusion. She expected wounded silence, defensive questions. Instead, I gave her nothing, no fuel for her narrative. That night, while she slept, I logged into our bank accounts. 3 months of quiet transfers to a separate account. Small enough to seem harmless. But to me, it screamed preparation. She was building a lifeboat. And that's when I made my move. Not to win her back, but to show her what it meant to lose me. I wouldn't plead. I wouldn't grovel. That's not who I am. I would act, with precision. The next morning, I hit the gym before sunrise. Then called my lawyer. My financial advisor. It was time to armor up. She noticed immediately. The shift. The silence where daily check-ins used to be. The autonomy in my decisions. When she finally asked what was going on, I smiled. Just focusing on some personal goals. By Monday, I'd secured every important document. By midweek, I had a detailed map of our finances and what separation would cost us both. Information became my weapon, and while she floated in her fantasies, I was getting ready for the real consequences. This wasn't about whether we'd survive. This was about whether she'd earned the right to stay after treating me like a placeholder. The ball was in my court now, and I wasn't planning to prove my worth with words. I'd become the man she couldn't afford to lose. Not out of love, but consequence. While she scribbled reasons to leave, I was busy becoming the reason she'd regret it. The transformation wasn't loud, it was relentless. I started waking before dawn, often gone before she stirred. My presence became unpredictable. Some nights I was home. Others, I simply texted, working late. 2 weeks in, I joined an upscale gym downtown and hired a trainer. Not just for fitness, for psychological impact. I bought sharper clothes. Got a tailored haircut. Each detail, a quiet declaration. When she finally commented on the change, I shrugged. Felt like switching things up. But her stare lingered, measuring, reassessing. She was recalculating my value in real time. I carved out space everywhere. Our usual weekend brunches? Now solo. Meeting a colleague. I'd say casually, leaving no room for her to tag along. The truth? I was rebuilding my world. One where her validation wasn't the centerpiece. Through mutual friends, I learned her newly single confidant had been feeding her fantasy. Men are disposable. The dating pool is overflowing. She'd been sold freedom like it was a luxury product. But I was no longer her safety net. I was becoming the storm she hadn't prepared for. Her friend, the one cheering on this so-called empowerment, had conveniently left out one crucial detail. Her own husband had walked out for someone younger. A bitter twist rewritten as freedom. I started hosting colleagues at home, something I rarely did before. Driven, well-connected people who talked about investments, future plans, and personal growth. She hovered nearby, listening more than participating, her expression shifting as they praised my recent decisions. The image she'd crafted of me, stagnant, unambitious, was cracking under the weight of outside validation. That week, She wore the dress I'd once complimented and made my favorite meals with no occasion in sight. Casual suggestions for weekend trips, echoes of our better days, surfaced out of nowhere. But I kept my distance. Polite, never cold, just distant. Then came the Thursday call. I took it right in front of her. A past colleague offering me a consulting opportunity, more money, less time. I accepted without hesitation, watching her casual posture turn stiff with realization. That night, she reached for me, initiating intimacy for the first time in months. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm exhausted." The way her face fell said everything. The dynamic had shifted. She was now the one reaching, searching, for something she'd assumed was always hers. Through quiet observation, I learned more. Apartment listings in her browser. Receipts for career coaching. She was laying the groundwork for her escape. Confident, I remained blind. But her moves were clumsy. Obvious. She was playing checkers. I was playing chess. Saturday, she saw me packing an overnight bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, trying for casual but tripping over the edge in her voice. "Meeting potential investors. Might run through Sunday." "You've been gone a lot lately," she said, trailing me from closet to bed. "Is everything okay with us?" I paused, met her gaze. "That depends on what you want us to be." Her face drained of color. For a second, I thought the dam would break, that she'd confess the list, the account, the whispers shared over lattes with her friend. But no, she retreated behind a brittle smile. "Just missing you, that's all." I zipped the bag and walked past her. Truth was, I wasn't meeting investors, I was meeting with divorce attorneys. Not to start a war, just to prepare. Because preparation wins battles. Not emotion, not sentiment. By the end of the month, her 15 reasons to leave would meet the one reason she'd desperately want to stay. And that reason? It wasn't negotiable. It wasn't soft. It was truth, forged through consequence. The third week, I began financial recalibration. A significant portion of my savings moved to a new account. Not secret, just separate. I wasn't hiding. I was signaling. I booked a solo appointment with our financial advisor. When she asked why she wasn't included, I said, "Just looking into retirement options. Didn't think it would interest you." She stared, trying to decide if the remark was careless or calculated. Later that week, she invited me to dinner with her newly divorced confidant. I declined without flinching. "I'd rather focus on work tonight." No apology, no excuse. The glance they exchanged spoke volumes. This wasn't just friendship, it was influence. A slow, steady recruitment into independence, scripted by someone still licking her wounds. At work, I negotiated new terms, remote flexibility, increased autonomy. My boss raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect that level of assertiveness," he said. He didn't know I was laying the bricks of an entirely new foundation. The shift in me was subtle, but the ripples were undeniable. She started calling midday, something she never used to do. Curious about my location, my company, my plans. I answered calmly, giving her nothing to latch onto. One evening, I caught her checking my phone as I stepped out of the shower. She snapped it shut and pretended to read. I said nothing, just got dressed slowly, deliberately. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked as I passed. Then I stepped out to make a call. The silence that followed shook her more than yelling ever could. Her tactics changed after that. She brought up therapy, a weekend retreat, even a second honeymoon. Preservation moves. Not out of love, but fear. She was realizing the safety net she'd always taken for granted was quietly being pulled away. To each offer, I replied the same. "Let me think about it." Never yes. Never no. Meanwhile, I doubled down on self-investment. My network expanded. Old friends called, saying I seemed sharper, more alive. At work, my energy surged. Solutions came quicker, results more impactful. I was becoming the man she no longer recognized, and the one she feared losing most. I had become the best version of myself. Not for her, never for her, but because excellence is the most unforgiving form of revenge. She underestimated me. That mistake would echo louder than any argument. The list, her manifesto of departure, still lived in the drawer. I checked now and then. It was always there. Sometimes with a smudge of coffee, a crease through the page. Proof she'd returned to it. Rereading. Rethinking. By the end of the month, 3 things were unmistakably different. First, my body, sharpened by discipline and steel-willed routine, commanded attention. Second, my finances, diversified and elevated, placed me on new ground. And third, most crucially, my mindset had shifted. I was no longer a husband waiting to be chosen. I was a strategist, choosing my next move. One evening, I came home late to find her in the kitchen. Dinner plated, wine waiting, dressed in the outfit I'd gifted her last Christmas. "I thought we could talk," she said softly. "About us." I sat down, face unreadable. "What about us?" I asked, ignoring the wine and reaching for water instead. "You've changed," she said. Her voice trembled, reaching across the table. "You're distant, unavailable. I feel like you're slipping away." The irony was rich. The same grievances she once used to justify leaving were now reasons for concern. I met her gaze. "Interesting observation," I said. "Tell me, when did my presence start to matter again?" She recoiled, like I'd struck her, though my voice hadn't risen once. "What does that mean?" she whispered. I paused, measuring every word. The moment wasn't right for the final move. One more piece had to fall. "It means I've been working on myself," I replied. "And sometimes, that takes space." She reached for my hand. Once, that touch would have anchored me. Now it felt strategic. I let her hold it for a moment before I stood. "I have an early meeting. Thanks for dinner." Later, I heard her crying in the bathroom. But her tears no longer stirred anything in me. They weren't for us. They were for the crumbling scaffolding of her exit plan, now unraveling faster than she could control. The next morning arrived sharp with purpose. I dressed with intention, tailored suit, polished shoes. Not just to look the part, but to command it. No words passed between us at breakfast. The tension? Palpable. Heavy. Measured. I left, like it was any other day, then returned at noon. She was in the office, voice low, tense. The kind of voice people use when they're talking about futures they don't want you to hear. When she saw me, the call ended abruptly. "You're home early," she said, smile cracking. "Is everything okay? We need to talk." I didn't sit. I walked to the drawer, pulled out the list, and placed it between us like evidence in court. 15 reasons to leave me," I said. "When were you planning to tell me?" She froze. Words stalled. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to see what's really going on." She tried to speak, to spin. "It's not. It's exactly what I think." I cut in, steady and cool. "Your friend gets divorced, and suddenly our marriage needs a forensic audit." "How convenient." "I was just exploring," she started. "Career coaching. Apartment searches. Secret account. Exploring." I raised an eyebrow. "No, that's planning." I watched her buckle beneath each word. "While I was building," I continued, "you were preparing your exit." Her face said everything. She hadn't expected me to know. Hadn't expected me to see. "Let's go through your list," I said calmly. "Financial stagnation? I now earn double." "Emotional unavailability? From someone who checked out months ago." I dismantled her accusations with surgical precision. Not out of spite. Out of truth. "This list isn't about me," I said. "It's your reflection, projected onto me. Easier than facing your own discontent." Her tears came, predictable and hollow. A final shield against reality. "I don't know what happened," she sobbed. "You used to be different. We used to be different." I finally took a seat across from her, claiming the position of control, not out of dominance, but clarity. People evolve. The real question is whether they grow together or apart. "You chose apart," I said evenly. "And you didn't even give me the professional courtesy of a conversation." Her tears halted, expression hardening. "Professional courtesy? Is that what our marriage is to you now? That's how you treated it?" I replied without flinching. "Like a contract you could void with a pros and cons list." Silence expanded between us, tense, loaded. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So what happens now?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope, placing it beside her list. "This," I said. "This happens now." She opened it, hands trembling, braced for divorce papers. Instead, photographs. Her recently divorced friend, arm in arm with my colleague's husband. Laughing, flirting, familiar touches. Multiple sightings across different dates. "The marriage she destroyed wasn't an accident," I said calmly. "She's not encouraging your independence. She's recruiting allies. She's weaponizing your doubt to justify her own decisions." Her face shifted, shock, disbelief, and then the slow, creeping awareness that comes when denial can no longer hold back truth. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "That's your question?" I said, voice low. not how the person whispering in your ear has been systematically poisoning our marriage. She stared at the photos, the weight of her own narrative collapsing under them. This doesn't change the issues between us, she said quietly. No, I agreed. But it reframes them. You've been manipulated. And now you need to ask yourself if you're willing to throw everything away for someone else's unfinished grief. I stood, buttoning my jacket with finality. I'm not here to convince you to stay. I'm here to give you one clear, irrefutable reason that makes every bullet point on your list meaningless. She looked up, uncertain, searching. What reason? I know my worth, I said. And I'm willing to walk away from everything I bring to the table if it's not recognized. Unlike you, I've prepared for both outcomes. And the life you're picturing without me? It won't look like the fantasy you've been sold. That landed. A quiet truth heavier than any insult. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? Her voice cracked, panic creeping in. To a hotel, I said. You have 48 hours. To decide what you want, not what she wants. Not what some Pinterest version of freedom looks like. I paused at the threshold. If you choose to leave, I'll respect it. But understand, there will be no friendship. No second chances. No circling back when reality disappoints. Clean break. Permanent. The door clicked shut behind me. Soft, final, absolute. Now came the part that required the most strength. Walking away and meaning it, regardless of the ending. The hotel suite felt like a different universe. Crisp linens. Modern furniture. No shared memories embedded in the walls. For 48 hours, I became a ghost. No calls. No texts. Silence became my loudest statement. I immersed myself in work. Finalizing the consulting deal, mapping the new project, setting up conversations for future ventures. My output soared, no longer suffocated by emotional drag. Her messages came steadily at first, confused, angry, desperate. I read each one. I replied to none. This wasn't cruelty. It was discipline. By the second day, her tone shifted. From outrage, how could you walk away like this? To uncertainty, I've been thinking about what you said. From victimhood, this is so unfair. To ownership, I made some calls today. Exactly the arc I anticipated. Denial, anger, bargaining, reflection. That evening, my lawyer confirmed everything was ready if needed. Division of assets, financial clarity, all prepared. I had designed two outcomes. One built on mutual respect, the other a clean and efficient end. As the 48 hours expired, I checked out and drove to a coffee shop far from our neighborhood. Neutral ground. I sat, calm, unreadable. I wasn't waiting for reconciliation. I was waiting to see if she could face the weight of her own choices. My phone buzzed at the exact deadline. A text. Meet me at our favorite restaurant. The one where I'd proposed. A transparent attempt at leveraging sentiment, reaching into the past to steer the present. I declined her invitation to the restaurant, suggesting the coffee shop instead. A subtle but clear signal. This conversation wouldn't be softened by nostalgia. No rose-tinted memories to dull the edge of truth. She arrived 15 minutes early. Predictable. Another tactical move meant to project initiative, control. Her appearance was curated with precision. Hair styled the way I'd once admired. The perfume from our anniversary lingering faintly in the air. I noticed, but gave nothing away. Just a nod. No smile. Thank you for meeting me, she began, voice steady, though her fingers twitched anxiously around her coffee cup. These 2 days have been illuminating. I remained silent, letting her wade into her own discomfort. I made a horrible mistake, she said finally. The list, it was never meant for you to see. It was just me working through thoughts, everything going on with my friend. The list existed. I cut in, calm but unflinching. Whether I was meant to see it is irrelevant. You created it. You believed those things when you wrote them. That's what we're dealing with. Her mask cracked slightly. I've ended my friendship with her, she said. After I confirmed what you showed me, it all made sense. She's been feeding me worst-case scenarios, selling this fantasy of independence. Your choice of influences speaks volumes, I replied. But this isn't about her. It's about us. Have you made your decision? She reached across the table, fingers stretching toward mine. I kept my hands firmly wrapped around my cup. The gesture fell short. I want to save our marriage, she said, voice trembling. I realize now what I almost destroyed, because I was listening to the wrong people and magnifying minor problems instead of valuing what we had. I studied her, searching for more than regret, looking for something real. What changed your mind? I asked, not to make her beg, but to make her think, to see if this was a performance or a breakthrough. The question caught her off guard. She had expected absolution, not interrogation. When you left, it felt like the floor vanished beneath me, she admitted. Everything I'd taken for granted, your presence, your steadiness, suddenly it was gone. And the list, it felt meaningless. What matters is that I was about to lose you. I let the silence stretch, then pressed further. Those are feelings. Emotional responses to consequences. I'm asking what changed in your understanding of us. She took a long breath. Her voice, when it came, was steadier. I was holding our marriage up to an impossible ideal, looking for what was missing instead of appreciating what was present. But the biggest shift. She paused. I realized you don't need me. You choose me. That's the difference. And I need to become someone who deserves that choice. There it was. The insight I'd been maneuvering her toward. Not fear of loss, but respect for value. What do you want moving forward? I asked, voice even. A chance to rebuild, she said. To be worthy of what we created. And I know it can't be under the old terms. I nodded, just slightly, letting the smallest thread of warmth enter my expression. I'll return home tonight, I said. We'll begin there. As I stood, she gently took my wrist. Are you still committed to us? Or is this just closure? I looked her in the eye, really looked. My first unguarded moment in weeks. I meant every word of my vows, I said. But continuing this marriage requires a new contract. One where my value is never up for debate again. She nodded slowly. The relief in her face was real, but so was the shift. She understood now. The balance between us had changed. Permanently. That evening, I returned home, not with haste, not with reluctance. Just purpose. The house was spotless, a clear sign of nervous energy redirected into order. She'd cooked again, but unlike before, the effort wasn't performative. No wine, no music, no illusions. Just food, just space, just time. We ate in silence, the kind that carries gravity. Afterward, I cleared my throat and began. If we're rebuilding, here's the foundation. These are the new terms. She straightened, tense but ready. First, full transparency, I said. Separate financial accounts are fine, but every transaction disclosed. No secrets, no contingency plans hidden in shadows. She nodded, eyes locked on mine. No argument, no resistance. I continued. Any friendship that undermines our marriage ends immediately. No debates, no exceptions. If someone promotes separation over resolution, it signals a failure of loyalty and triggers an immediate reassessment of my commitment. She swallowed hard, nodded again. A visible recognition that this wasn't just about rebuilding trust. It was about protecting it from contamination. Communication, I continued. Direct, immediate. No more lists. No more stored-up grievances. If it matters, say it. If it's silent, it doesn't exist. Agreed, she whispered. I've learned that lesson the hard way. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. And above all, respect. Not just in theory, but in practice. Every day, my worth isn't up for review when you're frustrated or comparing me to someone else's filtered highlight reel. It's been proven over time, through action. Tears welled in her eyes, but not the manipulative kind. These were different. These were from recognition, not regret. I understand, she said, then paused. But I want to add something. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. Accountability, she said. I broke the trust, and I know I won't earn it back with words or one good week. I'm ready to show up, consistently, until it's solid again. That caught me off guard. Not because I doubted her sincerity, but because it was finally grounded in real self-awareness. I gave a small nod. There's one more thing, I said quietly, reaching into my pocket. I placed a small box on the table. Her eyes widened. What's this? Open it. Inside was a key. Plain, unassuming, but loaded with meaning. That's the key to a safe deposit box, I said. It holds everything I gathered, documents, legal files, records. My full preparation for life without you. She touched it gently, her hand trembling. I'm giving it to you, I continued, because I won't live in a halfway space. No more contingency plans. No more backdoors. Either we rebuild completely, or we part cleanly. No secrets. No half measures. All in, or all out. She curled her fingers around the key, the weight of it settling in her palm. Not just metal, but trust. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me the chance to earn this. Don't thank me yet, I said. This is the start of the hard part. Rebuilding takes longer than breaking ever did. In the weeks that followed, the shift in our dynamic was undeniable. Her tone changed, more attentive, less dismissive. When I spoke about work, she listened, not out of obligation, but genuine interest. And the more I saw her show up, the more space I gave in return. Trust, rebuilt in increments. Then came the real test. Her divorced friend, the original puppeteer, tried to reconnect. But instead of hiding it, she brought me her messages and showed me the response she had drafted. A firm, graceful refusal to continue contact. No excuses, no blurred lines. Just clarity and closure. That night, as we settled into bed, she finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air. What was it, she said. The one reason you knew would make me stay, when I had 15 to leave? I turned toward her, meeting her gaze. It was never about making you stay, I said. It was about making you understand what leaving meant. I let that sit. You weren't walking away from a man who would beg. You were walking away from a man who would thrive. With or without you. Who had value, options, a future, one he had built independently. Her eyes widened slightly as the truth landed. The one reason that made all 15 irrelevant. I continued. I became the man you couldn't afford to lose. Not by manipulation, not by guilt, but by refusing to live beneath my worth. She nodded slowly, the truth settling deep in her chest. That's why none of my reasons held up, she said. They were complaints, not convictions. I was reacting to discomfort, not to who you were. And when I faced the possibility of losing you, I realized what I was really risking. Exactly, I said. And that clarity, that's the foundation now. I choose this marriage every day, not because I need to, but because I want to. The day that choice isn't respected is the day I walk. 6 months later, our relationship bears little resemblance to what it was before. Stronger communication, clearer boundaries, mutual respect rooted not in fear of loss, but in deep appreciation. We never spoke of the list again. It was burned, literally, in a fire pit behind our home. A ceremonial end to what almost destroyed us. But the one reason? That remains. Not as a threat, but as a truth. Sometimes, the most powerful reason to stay isn't a bullet-pointed list. It's the quiet, irrefutable presence of something irreplaceable. Something only truly seen when its absence becomes real. And in that recognition, everything changed.